So I was born and raised in San Antonio. I had a great, easy childhood. You know, I love my mom and my dad. My older brother Clement, half brother and half sister, pretty much made A's at the academy. I was a smart student. I was an Eagle Scout by the time I was 14. I was a little bit of like a rebellious punk, towards the end of middle school, but it's
what boy isn't?
Exactly, that could all be easily forgiven. But a big part of my story today and kind of my development is something that happened when I was 14, the summer of 2001, which was that my dad had a sudden heart attack and passed away. We were running to catch a flight. My mom and dad and I were running to catch a flight in the Atlanta airport, a connecting flight. We were visiting some friends in Maine, and while we were running to the gate, he suddenly had a heart attack. And we rushed to a nearby hospital, and within an hour basically found out that he'd passed away. And he had, as far as I knew at that age, I was 14, I didn't know of him having any sort of health issues or anything. So from May 2001, I'm graduating with straight A's, near the top of my class, Eagle Scout, to just within 3 months, my dad has passed away. I'm starting high school at St. Mary's Hall. So already a tough transition, right?
Yeah.
From an all-boys military school to a co-ed high school with new people, girls. I'm 14. I'm going through puberty. It's going to be hard anyways. And then that happens between 8th grade and freshman year. My response to that at that age, of course, confusion, depression, and pretty shortly thereafter, abusing drugs and alcohol, drinking, taking pills, just kind of all that. And that sort of, that combination of just kind of depression and rebellion and confusion and this misguided live for the moment attitude, not in a healthy way of seizing the most out of life, but rather I have seen how quickly a life can end, therefore I don't care anymore, therefore I'm going to do what I want. Just misguided, So essentially that, I was going to say unfortunately, but I won't even say unfortunately, because it's such a huge part of who I am, and it's shaped who I am today. But for all of high school, I would get kicked out, I would get arrested. I went to a boarding school in Utah for a year. I come back, I get kicked out again from St. Mary's Hall twice, which I now jokingly say is a bragging right. I'm the only guy to get kicked out of St. Mary's Hall twice. And probably nobody's ever going to touch that record ever. It was very...
You were a big bad Ram at the time.
I sure was.
you were a legend.
I know. And then like I said, I went to SMU, and it just carried over, and it progressed as these things do. And by the time I was 19, 20, this was a full-blown addiction of Oxycontin and cocaine and daily drug use. And so, that was such a tumultuous almost decade for me, for my mom, for my brother, and looking at just the person I was back then and the kind of things I put them through, which the recovery process, I'll just say I put all that behind me in 2010. Was the drugs stopped there. It's now 2018, and about 5 years ago there was a little experiment with drinking again that just I put an end to pretty quickly thereafter. It just wasn't going the way I thought it would. But that stuff, it's so funny too, because as soon as I got sober and I actually recovered from the addiction, and I should say it's the hardest thing I've ever done. Getting off those drugs was harder than losing my father. And there were times where there were times where if I could choose between being sober and having my dad back in my life, I would actually choose being sober, because I was unable to do it. And I was so consumed in addiction and had tried so hard to do anything to stop that even my strongest desire meant nothing. Nothing, So by the time this was actually behind me, miraculously, which I did not think possible, and that's a whole other conversation, and it's a spiritual conversation, but it's incredible to me, By the time that was all behind me, and that was also from the moment I last used those drugs to where I was finally ready to like be Rahm again, it was like it was about 2 years of like 2 years of sobriety where I was a shell kind of. I was afraid.
Yeah,
I didn't know how to be in social settings.
right, because you had to rely on only you
Yeah.
to do that.
I had to rely on myself rather than drugs after 10 years. And like, I kind of, I mean, 14, the age at which I started, is so impressionable.
Yeah,
and like my mind is developing, and I basically conditioned myself to be the life of the party, but like I always had to be on drugs, right? So after these like 2 years of slowly rebuilding and my confidence and feeling like I'm learning to love myself again and forgive myself and other people forgiving me, and me being, this is hugely important, me being accountable for what I did, you know, and making sure people that were affected knew that I was owning up to it, etc. All my passions came like bubbling back up to the surface after these 2 years. Playing music, playing drums, playing guitar, and that this totally ties into now like this kind of laser focus on photography. I think my pursuit at times, like insane pursuit of like getting the shot or traveling or whatever, is totally that same. It's that same like what used to be a misguided passion and zest for like partying is now like much more focused on something a lot healthier.
Right.
But that is my drive, and I think with so many artists, you know, there's sometimes like a darkness that gets.
There's almost often always a darkness.
Yeah, that gets like refocused, and unfortunately sometimes it doesn't get refocused, and there's still this beautiful art, and then you lose the artist.
Yeah.
As tragic as that is, and then other times I think it can be kind of like honed and shaped and whittled, and then all of a sudden I'm left with precision, you know, this precision focus.